This fall on 207, we have been interviewing all of the candidates for major office in Maine. With us tonight for our last interview, the Democratic candidate for Congress in the 2nd District, incumbent Jared Golden. Thanks for coming in. Nice to have you here.
Good to be here.
Let's start with the pocketbook issue that is clearly number one on people's minds right now, inflation. We could spend all evening talking about how the inflation came to be. We could talk about what kind of powers Congress may or may not have to truly influence it, but let's give it a shot. What steps would you like to see Congress take now or in the next session to address rising inflation?
Well, I am going to take just a quick second to look back, first of all, Rob, because I think I've been unique in Congress early on in 2021 in agreeing with economists like Larry Summers in saying it's time for Congress to pump the brakes on stimulus spending. And as a result, I voted no against the American Rescue Plan. Was the only Democrat in the House to vote no on Build Back Better. And in part, in explaining my positions on those big votes, I made clear my concern about anything that might add to inflationary pressures that we're building as a result of the pandemic.
That is a vote that you cast. So
correct.
Fast forward to now.
Fast forwarding
Where do we go
to now.
In the future on this?
For those of us who have been warning about this issue and concerned about it, particularly Senator Joe Manchin and I, we looked at the IRA, which we voted for in August, and said a couple of things. One is reducing the deficit will help to push back against the inflationary environment that we're in. That's one thing that bill does, reducing the deficit by $300 billion over 10 years. It does that largely through lowering government spending in the healthcare space. So negotiating lower drug prices reduces government spending. That's a good thing if you're trying to fight inflation. It's also a good thing for my constituents because it's going to cap out-of-pocket costs and lower prescription drug prices for the people of Maine.
Savings of $300 billion over 10 years.
Correct.
In the big picture of the U.S. economy is really a small amount of money.
First time in over a decade that either party has passed major legislation in Congress that reduces the deficit at all. So I think it's a big deal. And I wouldn't bat an eye at $300 billion. It's a good start, but the principle should hold going forward that if something is worth doing, it's worth paying for. When you look at the spending that I have supported in Congress in the last 2 years, investments in our infrastructure over 7 years, if you're having supply chain problems, you got to invest in our supply chain system. So investing in infrastructure, creating jobs over 7 years, that's not stimulus spending, that's going to be helpful over time for our economy. The CHIPS and Science Act, it's the same premise. Long-term investments to help work through the economic problems that we have or make the necessary investments for the future, but it was time to pump the brakes on stimulus, and that's the position that I took.
Let me ask you about Social Security, which is hugely important to so many of your constituents. The trustees of the Social Security system, the trustees of the system have said that if nothing is done, then in about 15 years, the Social Security system is not going to be able to give people the payments they expect. It's not going to be able to meet its obligations. So that leaves basically three choices: raising Social Security taxes, raising retirement ages at which people can collect, or reducing benefits. Which would you choose?
The question is raising the taxes on who, Rob? I would not support any plan that raises taxes on working middle class people. No one ever really talks about the fact that under the Social Security system as it is today, people stop paying into Social Security on their earned income above about I think it's like $30,000 a year. So there are people out there who are millionaires who make as high as $1 million a year who aren't paying anything into Social Security, but they're getting the same amount out of it. So the easiest thing we can do is lift that cap and ask the wealthiest people to continue to pay in the same amount that they are in every dollar that working middle class people are. That alone right there would bring decades of solvency back to the Social Security system, which I agree is critically important for our seniors.
In just the last few weeks, the paper mill in Jay announced it is going to shut down. About 230 jobs will be affected. It's the latest chapter in the decades-long decline of the paper industry in Maine. Is there anything that can turn this around, or is this what we're going to continue to see, is the slow erosion, or maybe the not so slow erosion of that industry in this state?
Well, first, Rob, when I look at the many different mills that I've been to, whether it be paper mills or sawmills and other exciting forest products, businesses out there, and I meet the workers that are doing it, I don't agree that we're in a long, irreversible decline. We have an incredibly skilled workforce.
We're in a long decline. It may not be irreversible, but it's a long decline. There's no question about that.
We also have the resource, which is the forest itself, and so I think it would be a mistake to not continue to make investments in the future of the forest products industry.
Is there anything specifically that the government can do, that the government can do in your role as a member of Congress?
For starters, when I talk to the Mill and J, and when I talk to the people that run the mill up in Rumford, one thing that they've always agreed is we need federal investment in things like infrastructure. The railroad line that both of those mills are on is rated quite low. It travels at very low speeds, and it's not as competitive for them economically as they wish it were, which forces them into more expensive trucking as an option. And they do use some freight, but it's not fast enough. So that's one thing that the government should do. But at the end of the day, what I want to say about the Mill and J is that digester explosion happened. That company received a massive insurance reimbursement payout on that, and they chose not to reinvest it back into the mill. Instead, they paid down their corporate debt. They thought more about their investors, investing in the market in Wall Street than they did about the workers in the community that had been working that mill for so many years. So that's a problem that we should be talking about as well. Had they put that money back in, invested in that skilled workforce and in that mill, they'd still be going strong, in my opinion, for years to come. That's not the decision that they made, and frankly, I'm upset about that.
Let me close with this question. Who is the living politician you most admire?
That's a tough question. Recently I've really respected the thoughtfulness of Senator Joe Manchin, and like me, he's at times broken with our party, and that's always a difficult position to be in. You get criticized from your own party, you get criticized from the other side almost no matter what you do. It takes a lot of courage sometimes to do what you think is right. But if you stay focused on what you think is good policy and what's good for your constituents, that's what the job is about at the end of the day. I admire him. Similarly, I admired Senator Mitt Romney. When you looked at the issue of impeachment, he took a difficult vote, but it was the one that he thought was right on principle. It happened to be identical to the very vote that I took, and so I know from experience that it was a difficult position. But at the end of the day, whether it's Senator Romney in that position, Senator Manchin in the other, both of them, I think would agree with me that if you can go home, look yourself in the mirror, and know that you did what you thought was right at the end of the day, then you can feel good about the decisions that you've made.
All right, that's the last word. Congressman Jared Golden, thank you for being with us today. We appreciate it. And if you'd like more information on Congressman Golden's re-election campaign, just head to the 207 section of our News Center Maine website. And stick around, we're going to return in just a moment.